This video is to help you complete the Git GitHub and Markdown challenge. The process in Windows and on Mac OS are slightly different, and I'll be showing you both of them today. Here in front of us is Mac OS, and I'm able here to switch over to Windows 10. I'll be moving back and forth between them. So remember, this is what Mac OS looks like. We got the little apple in the corner, and here is Windows. We got the little Windows icon down in the lower left. In either operating system, we're going to need to work at the command line. In the case of Mac OS, we're going to use the terminal. Here on the bar at the bottom, I have the terminal app. I'm going to throw it away. Didn't throw the app away, just threw the icon that references it away. And to find the terminal, we'll go to Applications, Utilities, and then here's Terminal. And I can drag it in the bar so I can have frequent access to it. If I launch the terminal, I am sitting at a particular place in the file system. If I type pwd, print working directory, it shows me where in the file system I am located. And I'm currently in /users/Dale, which is my home directory. To see the files that are in this directory, I can type ls to list them. And if I want to see the details on the files, I can type ls-al, and I can see them that way. And here on the left, it shows the rights in the files, who has the ability to access it, how big they are, etc. Now let's flip over to Windows and look at the same situation. In Windows, we're going to be using Git Bash instead of the terminal. I have a Git Bash icon here on my desktop. I also put one down here on the bar. If I go to the Windows icon and scroll down to Git, you'll see Git Bash here in the list, and I'm going to launch Git Bash. This is just like the terminal we had over in Mac OS, and since it's Git Bash, it will have the same commands that it uses. So Windows has a terminal that's different from this, and the command you use in the Windows terminal will be, and is often different. But here we're going to use Unix-style commands, the same commands that we're using in Mac OS. So if I want to see where I currently am, I could type pwd. In this case, I'm in /c/user/Dale Musser. It's similar, but a little different. The /c at the beginning there actually refers to the C drive. And so on the C drive, there is a users directory, and inside the users directory is a directory Dale space Musser. If I type ls-al, just like on the Mac, I can see the details about these files. So I'm going to switch back to the Mac again. pwd again tells me where I'm in users Dale. I want to do some work, and I often, to do my work, will go to the Finder. And in the Finder, I will say go to Documents, to something like Projects, and then here's where I'm working on projects. In fact, that's where I'm going to work on my project today. I'm going to create a folder here called Markdown. Now the question is, here in the terminal, how would I get to that Markdown directory? Well, one thing I can do is use the Command key I, or Control-click and choose Info in the file, and we'll see here that a path is provided to where this file is located, and we need to identify it right here. It's Macintosh HD, users Dale. See, I'm in Dale, users Dale. Documents, projects. So to change directories, I would do cd documents, and do ls, and up there is projects. I can do cd projects, ls, and I can cd to Markdown. So I'm in an empty directory that is the Markdown directory where I'm going to do my work. Let me switch back over to Windows. Now here typically you'd go to Windows and you might type like File Explorer, and you could open up File Explorer, and you might think, okay, I want to work in Documents, and you see all the stuff that's listed here. And I'm going to hold that to the side. I'm going to come back here again, type pwd, C users Dale Musser. I'm going to do ls. And so in this list, I see, let's see here, I have documents right there. It looks like documents. And this is, it says this PC documents. And you might think, oh, well, they're the same thing. So we're going to cd to documents and then do an ls. And it doesn't look like the same list. Here we see my trip, my project, OO design, and they're not over in this other list because Windows has kind of confused things. That documents folder and the documents folder inside my user account, again, I'm going to type pwd here, inside C users Dale Musser, these are two different things. How can I get to this documents directory? Well, I'm going to go to this PC, C drive, users, Dale Musser. So you'll notice that matches. Users, Dale Musser, went to the C drive, users, Dale Musser, and then documents. And you'll see my trip, O design, my project are there. And so I could come out here and say new folder and call this Markdown. Oops, didn't mean to click there. Markdown, come back here, type ls, and you'll see that here is the Markdown directory, and I could change to the Markdown directory by doing that. And if I type ls, there are no files in that directory. So on my Mac, I've used the terminal to get to the directory I want to work in. On Windows, we've done exactly the same thing. Just remember that the typical documents directory and the documents directory that's beneath users and your name are two different things. So next, I'm going to come back to the Mac. We need to work with Git and GitHub, and we're going to complete this challenge. To do that, we're going to access the Git and GitHub using the command line, which is available on Canvas. And in the process, it says that the first thing that we need to do is create a local project directory, which we just did. And it's Markdown. So regardless of whether I'm on the Windows side or over here on the Mac side, same thing. We're in our terminal and we're in the Markdown directory. And so that is the directory where our project's going to be, where we're going to put our work. Now, in order for us to implement the Git process, that is, bring this folder, this directory, under Git control and manage its contents, it can't be empty. It's just a rule within Git that empty directories aren't managed. So we need to put something in that directory. One way to create a file in a directory is using, at least on the Mac OS side, we'll check if it's on the Windows side, is use the touch command. So I could say touch, and then I'm going to do something that's a common practice. Create a file that begins with a dot that is called git keep, just to have a file in the directory so Git will, in essence, keep that directory. So we're going to put here touch git keep. And when I do that, the touch command creates an empty file of that name. But nonetheless, I have a file. Let's see if that also works over here in Windows. So I'm going to put here, and I'm in the directory Markdown, and I'm going to put touch.getKeep. ls. And there we have our git keep file. Now you notice ls didn't give me the git keep because ls won't display the dot files that begin with a dot. ls-al though does. So we have our file in a directory so that it isn't an empty directory. The next thing we're supposed to do is create a repository on GitHub. So I'm going to go to GitHub, and I am going to go to one of my repositories. So yeah, I have repositories up here. And if I expand this window a little bit and just go to the top of my account, we'll see here I can click on repositories there as well. To create a new repository, we find the new button and we click on it to create that new repo. Now, the question is, what should this repository be named? First thing I want to see is, were there any requirements about the naming of the repository? And basically, manage in a public GitHub repo, create a directory, choose your name. So it doesn't really look like it matters. So let's call it Markdown. That'll work. So project for Markdown challenge. I want to make it a public repository, and I want to initialize the repository with a README. And in fact, that's mentioned here. It says, minimally, the directories contain 2 Markdown files. One is to be the README Markdown, and the others be named whatever you like. This is going to create a README Markdown for me and put some initial content in it. So I'm going to click that. And then gitignore is used to ignore files and folders that aren't to be managed by Git. And in a development process, there are typically files that are there or that get generated that you don't want to manage, because each developer would have variants of those files. So they could be, like on a Mac, the .ds store file contains information that specifies how things are displayed when you display a list of files and folders. If that is managed and shared around, it can conflict with the file that another person has on their computer. Or if I am writing a program and compiling and generating intermediary files, I might not want to manage those. So we are going to typically add a gitignore. The question, though, is what gitignore do we use? And most of these gitignores are relative to platforms that we're programming on. One that we could choose here that I often choose is the one that I use for, say, iOS Swift development. So I could come up here and I could say that I'm going to use the Swift one. You can also search on the net for gitignores. Oops, gitignores. Ignore. And there are lists of them. So you could say gitignore list, collection of useful gitignore templates. So various gitignores that have been created. We're not going to worry too much about that today. If you want, choose the Swift one. I would like you to choose one so that we can apply it in the process. If we're programming, then we're going to definitely pick the one that matches the platform we're programming on. So I'm going to say create repository. And in this repository is the gitignore, which says what things shouldn't be managed by Git, and a readme.md, a markdown file. And that markdown file already contains within it this information. And if I were to go into edit mode here, you see that the markdown is a pound with the word markdown and then another string, project for markdown challenge. I'm going to add another line here. I'm going to put http, hit enter, https dalemusser.com. In less than greater than signs is a technique in Markdown for creating a link. If I edit this file, then I need to commit the changes. Committing is like doing a saving of the changes. So I'm going to say added dalemusser.com to readme.md. This message is a way to remember what it is you did in this commit. And it's the addition of this particular piece of information then gets stored along with the changes so that we know why those changes were made. And we are on the master branch. When a repository is created, the branch that is created is called the master branch. The master branch is often referred to as the working branch. It is where the products of your work, the results of what you've created, are to be, and they should be in working condition when they're in master branch. When we're not in master branch, and we're doing work, we do that in a feature branch. And if we're doing programming and we have a bug to fix, we might be working in a bug fix branch. Branches are just variants of our work that can hold differences, and then later in the process we can merge those differences into other branches or back into the master branch, which we'll see, so that everything's included. So we're going to commit the changes, and you'll see that this actually did become a link on the page, and it goes to my website. So I could add something else. Let's say I wanted to say hello world, where world is bolded. So I put double stars around it, and that will cause it to be bolded. I come down and change, and I will say here bolded world. Commit the changes. And it didn't stay. Hold it. Let's go edit again. Oh, there it is. Hello world. And I see star star. So go back again to the README. There it is. It hadn't updated yet. So hello world, and then world here is bolded. So you can edit directly here, but I want you to use the process at the command line to manage files, which is what you're going to have to do when you're programming. So we have our repo, and we now want to continue with the process. So I'm going to go back to Git and GitHub, and we've now created the repo. So now what we need to do is initialize Git in the local project directory. So I'm going to go back to the terminal. I'm still in that same directory, the Markdown directory, and I need to initialize Git. So I'm going to say git init. As soon as I do that, a .git directory is created. In fact, I can cd, that's change directory to another directory, to .git, and if I look inside of it, I see all of the pieces, the files, the folders that are used for managing the Git repo. If I want to go back up a directory, I do cd ... If I want to go further back up a directory, cd ... If I want to go back down to Markdown, we can go back there. So we now have initialized the Git repository. The next thing we need to do is do our first commit. And the first thing you do is you stage the files that are to be committed, and then you perform the commit. So to stage the files, we say git add, that is, what is it we're managing, what are we adding, and then dot to mean everything. So we are saying we want to manage all the files. So we say git add dot. And then we're going to do a commit. So we do git commit. And with the commit, just like we did online, we need to have a message with it. So we're going to have -m. And this is our first commit. So I'm going to put here first commit. So we have made a commit. That is like saving your place in a game or saving a file. It is saving a state. But we can have multiple commits, and these are states that we can go back to. So commits are a way of saving the work that we have done. So we've now done our commit. So now that we've committed, our next step is to create a remote for the local repository. So a remote means that we want to define this remote location here on GitHub. Our repo is at a particular clone with HTTPS URL. And what we need to do, it says the git remote added below creates an alias for the remote repository on GitHub. So we're going to issue a command, git remote add origin, and then we're going to supply a URL. Origin is going to be the name, in essence, that we're giving to this URL so we don't have to type it out over and over again. So we want to execute this line, but we need the URL for the repository. So we're going to go here, highlight, and copy that URL. Then go to the terminal, and we are going to type git remote add origin, and then the URL. Now, origin is the name that we're giving to the URL, the alias. So instead of having to type out the URL, we can just use the word origin. Why origin? Historical reasons. It is what was provided in the documentation. It's what people use. It doesn't have to be origin. People typically do. If we're working with multiple repositories on one project, they can't all be named the same thing, so we might have different names, but for our purposes, we're going to name the remote repository origin. Enter. So now we need to take the stuff that we have up on GitHub and bring it down into the local repository. We, in essence, have two repositories that are currently unrelated to each other. The one up here and the one on my local machine. So to bring them together, we need to do this pull and rebase from origin. A pull brings stuff from the remote repository and brings it and mixes it with the stuff that we've got here local. Now the thing is, if I just do git pull origin master, it's going to fail. And it says refusing to merge unrelated histories because these two things don't seem related to each other. But we can tail the remote repository to be brought together with my local stuff, which at this point really is just that one git keep file. And we do that by adding -- rebase to the command. And if we have these unrelated histories and we do a rebase, then we're able to do the pull. So I'm going to say git pull -- rebase origin, that's the alias for that clone with HTTPS URL to the repo. And then master is the branch. And right now, we only have one branch. It is the master branch. So we do that. And it looks like it was successful. And if I type ls-al, you see that we now have the gitignore file and we have the readme.md file. So the next step is, well, we didn't have a gitignore here in the first place. And if there are files and folders under management prior to the gitignore that the gitignore once ignored, then they might stay managed when we don't want them to be. So the key of this next step is to apply the gitignore, which means we're going to basically tell GitHub to forget what it's managing and then tell it to manage again, but in the context where a gitignore is present. So I'm going to follow the commands that are here. First, git rm -r --cached dot. That removes the management of this set of files. Then we're going to do the normal staging and committing of the files. So it's going to bring under git control the things that it should that are not part of gitignore. So I'm going to say git commit -m, and the message here is that I'm applying gitignore. Where I stopped in the process in the video was right here. We had just finished the commit to indicate that we have applied the gitignore. The next step would be to push what we have to the remote repository and continue to follow the processes that are outlined in this document. So I don't want to give away at this point the whole process and demonstrating the whole thing to you, but I've led you up to the point where you should be able to continue to follow the steps that are listed in this document. So we want to push what we have up to the remote, and then we want to create a feature branch, check it out. We proceed then to do our development, which is what I'm going to look at next. We're going to produce some Markdown using a plain text editor, a programmer's text editor. Once you have created the Markdown and produced the files that you need to produce, or put the files that you need in the directory with the other files, then the next step is to take the feature branch that you've been working on, commit it, and push it to the remote repository. And then once you've finished developing your Markdown, creating the content for this assignment, it needs to be merged into the master branch. So you're going to check out the master, and then you're going to do a git merge of the feature branch, and then you've got to push what's in the local repository up to the remote using git push, so that your final work is in the master branch up on GitHub. Now, what about creating the Markdown? Here I am on the Mac OS side, and I have Atom installed. I can open up Atom and say File, Open, and let's go find the directory we've been working in, Documents, Project, Markdown, and there is the README Markdown that I've pulled down from the repository that was originally created up there by hand with my edits still in it. And in Atom, I can go up here to Packages and say Markdown Preview and toggle the preview, and it will show the Markdown I'm writing rendered the way it should be rendered, and that lets you see that what you're doing is working okay. So let's say I wanted to create a link with a label on it. I could put bracket parentheses, and I could put here Dale Musser, and then over here I could use that same URL, and there in fact is that link that takes me out to my web page again. If I want to reference an image that's on the internet, so let's look up an image of the Bay Bridge. So here's a nice picture, control click on it, copy image address. I want to reference the image in the page, exclamation point, bracket, parentheses. The URL goes here. We'll say Bay Bridge, which is the alternative text there, and the exclamation point before it indicates there's an image, and you see that the image appears here. So I'm creating the Markdown that's being saved in the README file. It is also possible to link to another Markdown file. So I can create another Markdown file. So I'm going to say New File. This is a second page. It'll be like a paragraph. Above it, I'll put a header. Oops, edit undo. Above it, I'll put a header. So I'll put ## second page. File save as. And I'll call this second.md. So I'm going to go back to the README, and on this page I'm going to link to the second page. So here I'm going to put second.md. We'll call it second page here. Save. And if I click here, then that will lead me to the second page if it's up on GitHub. So the other thing that you can do while we're here, if you go to Packages, is install other packages if you want to, if you have your own computer. And there are packages for exporting this to PDF or exporting this to HTML. If I go over on the Windows side, the situation is the same. I can use other text editors if I want to. Here I have Notepad++. There might be a preview for it. I don't know if it does. Here I also have Atom, launching it. And I'm going to go here to this untitled page. Let me close these other ones. And I'm just going to type some Markdown in here, #, first document, and then a link in it, https apple.com. And here again, if I go to Packages, Markdown Preview, Toggle Preview, we're able to see that Markdown as it should be represented. So you can use Atom or some other editor to edit the Markdown. You don't necessarily need the preview, although it's nice if you get the Markdown right. There's no reason you need the preview. Once you get it on GitHub, you can test it. I'm going to leave it with you there in terms of how you edit Markdown documents, because I want you to work on it and figure some of this out yourself. It's active learning. One more thing before we go, I just want to briefly review some commands that you can do in the terminal. So I'm going to come back here to the one in Windows. First, to know what directory you're in, pwd. To change to another directory, you use cd. I don't know where I can change to, so I could type ls, and there's currently nothing in my Markdown directory to change to, unless I want to go up a directory, which would be cd ... That takes me back a directory. So if I want to go back down to Markdown, I could do cd Markdown. So if I want to create a directory, I can do mkdir, and I'm going to say make directory images. And if I do an ls, you see that we have the images directory there. And if I want to change to images, I can. If I need to create an empty file, I could say touch and then name the file, and one that is referenced in the document we've used is .getkeep, so I could say touch.getkeep and it will create it. If I type ls, I can't see it because ls doesn't list the dot files. If I type ls-al, then I can see all the files, folders, and directories. The ... directory listing here is the previous directory. It's a representation of it, and dot represents the current directory. Kind of maybe stupidly, cd dot just leaves you in the directory that you're in. To remove files, so let's say I want to remove that getkeep, I can use rm.getkeep. And if I want to remove a directory that contains potentially files in it, I could say rm to remove, -r recursively, f to force it so it doesn't ask me if I want to delete individually each thing that's in there, and then the directory I want to delete. Markdown, or not Markdown. What was the directory? It was images that I really wanted to do. So you notice I was able to get commands back. I'm using the up arrow to go back to a previous command. So I want to rm-rf images. And when I do that, ls-al, I see that the images directory is gone. Beyond that, you could Google Unix commands, Linux commands. So I'm going to open up a browser, and I'm going to say Linux commands. Basic Linux commands for beginners. RM, touch, mkdir, cd, ls, all the things that I've been mentioning, you can find them on the internet. Your job is to take the pieces given, the documentation, the videos, and follow the processes to create a set of Markdown pages as per the requirements in the challenge and get it into GitHub on the master branch.